The Pearl Isles were no longer a kingdom. They were a collection of broken promises, scattered like shattered jewels across the Sapphire Sea. For centuries, the Elephant Kings had ruled from the Sun Citadel, their authority absolute, their wisdom a beacon of stability in a tempestuous world. But the last king had died without an heir, leaving a vacuum that sucked in every greedy lord and ambitious foreign power. The Citadel, once a symbol of unity, now stood silent and empty, its sun-bleached walls a monument to a lost age of peace. Power was a game for vultures now, and the carcass of the kingdom was ripe for the picking. Into this chaos strode Lord Ilarion, a conqueror from the frigid north. His ships, with their dark sails and iron rams, had smashed the Isle's meager navies. His soldiers, clad in black steel and hardened by endless winter, had marched through the fertile lands, taking what they wanted. He claimed the ancient throne by right of conquest, a right written in blood and fire. The old ways were dead, he declared. The age of elephants was over. The age of the wolf had begun. His rule was a fist of iron, crushing dissent and demanding fealty from lords who had once knelt only to their own kings. The lords of the Isles were divided. Some bent the knee to Ilarion, seeing survival, or even opportunity, in submission. They offered their swords and their coffers to the new master, hoping for a place at his table. Others resisted, holding up in their ancient keeps, their banners flying in defiance. But their resistance was fractured, a series of isolated squabbles rather than a unified rebellion. They fought amongst themselves as much as they fought the invaders, old rivalries and petty grudges proving more potent than their shared hatred for the foreign usurper. The Pearl Isles bled from 1,000 cuts, each one deeper than the last. From his seat in the Lion Duchy, Duke Gammon watched the Isles crumble. He saw the smoke rising from distant villages, heard the whispers of Ilarion's cruelty, and felt the shame of his people's subjugation. The Sun Citadel's fall was more than a strategic loss. It was a wound to the soul of the Isles. It represented the end of their history, the erasure of their identity. Gammon knew that if no one stood up, if no one united the fractured houses, the Pearl Isles would be nothing but a name in a conqueror's ledger. The weight of this knowledge settled upon his shoulders, heavy as a shroud. Duke Gammon was a man forged for war, yet he was bound by the chains of peace. His father, the old Duke Tavish, ruled the Lion Duchy with a cautious hand. Tavish was a man of another time, a ruler who remembered the stability of the Elephant Kings and believed that weathering the storm was wiser than sailing into it. He saw Lord Ilarion as a passing tempest, a brutal force that would eventually exhaust itself. "We must protect our own," he would say, his voice thin and weary. "Let the other lords waste their strength. The lion that waits is the lion that survives." This philosophy was prudence to Tavish, but it was cowardice to his son. Gammon's frustration festered like a poisoned wound. He was young, strong, and his heart burned with a fierce pride for his homeland. He saw his father's inaction as a betrayal of their duty. Every day that Ilarion sat on the throne was an insult. Gammon would spend his hours in the training yard, the clash of his sword against a shield the only outlet for his rage. He drilled his men, the famed Lion Guard, relentlessly, pushing them to the brink. He saw the fear in the eyes of his people and the arrogance in the faces of Ilarion's patrols. He knew that waiting would not save them. It would only ensure their eventual destruction. The arguments between father and son became a daily ritual in the halls of the Lion's Den, their ancestral castle. "You are a fool, boy," Tavish would thunder, his face flushed with anger. "You would lead our people to slaughter for the sake of your pride." Gammon would stand his ground, his jaw set. "And you, father, would have us die on our knees for the sake of your fear. Is this the legacy of the Lion Duchy, to hide in our den while wolves devour the flock? We are lions, not sheep." The words, once spoken, could not be unsaid, and a chasm grew between them, wide and deep. Gammon's ambition was not for a crown, not yet. It was for justice, for the restoration of his home. He dreamt of a united Isles, free from foreign dominion, with the banners of its own houses flying proudly over the Sun Citadel once more. He believed he was the only one with the strength and the will to make it happen. His father saw only a reckless youth chasing glory, but Gammon saw a path to salvation. He knew the cost would be high, paid in blood and sorrow, but it was a price he was willing to pay. The old lion was content to sleep, but the young lion was hungry, and he was tired of waiting. As the rift between Gamun and his father deepened, a new power made its presence known. The merchant lords of the free cities, men whose kingdoms were built on coin rather than soil, sent their envoys. These men arrived not in armor, but in fine silks, their words as smooth and polished as the gems on their fingers. They spoke of a shared interest, of a desire to see the Pearl Isles free from Lord Ilarian's disruptive rule. His heavy taxes and control of the sea lanes were bad for business, they explained, and they were prepared to invest in a more favorable outcome. Their leader, a man named Master Vorlag, was a spider at the center of a web of gold. Master Vorlag met with Gamun in secret, away from the disapproving eyes of Duke Tavish. He offered ships, weapons and gold, enough to fund a war. "We admire your spirit, Duke Gamun," Vorlag said, his smile never quite reaching his cold, calculating eyes. "We see a leader, a man who can restore order. Lord Ilarian is a brute, a chaotic force. He disrupts the natural flow of commerce. We wish only to help you remove this obstacle for the good of all." The offer was a lifeline, a tangible path to the rebellion Gamun craved. It was the key that could unlock the cage his father had built around him. But Gamun was not a fool. He saw the greed glittering behind Vorlag's polite words. The merchant lords were not patriots. Their only allegiance was to profit. Their help would come at a price, not just in coin, but in influence. They wanted trading rights, monopolies on the Isle's resources, and a seat at the table of power once the fighting was done. They sought to replace Ilarian's iron fist with their own silken glove, a grip that might prove just as suffocating in the end. Gamun knew he was making a deal with vipers, but he needed their venom to fight the wolf at the door. He accepted their offer. The decision was a heavy one, a compromise that tasted of ash. He told himself it was a necessary evil, a tool to be used and then discarded. He would take their gold and their steel, drive Ilarian from the Isles, and then deal with the merchants. For now, they were allies. Their interests aligned in a fragile, temporary truce. But as the first chests of coin arrived in the dead of night, Gamun felt a chill that had nothing to do with the sea air. He had invited a new player into the game, one whose rules he did not fully understand. The secret alliance did not remain secret for long. Whispers like rats scurried through the castle corridors. Duke Tavish, though old, was not deaf. He confronted Gamun, his face a mask of fury and betrayal. "You have gone behind my back," he accused, his voice trembling with rage. "You have sold our honor to moneylenders and smugglers. You have brought war to our doorstep." Their argument was the fiercest yet, echoing through the stone halls. Gamun did not back down. He declared that the war was already there, and his actions were the only hope of winning it. He was seizing the destiny his father was too afraid to grasp. That night, tragedy struck. An assassin, silent as a shadow, slipped past the castle guards. The blade was quick, coated in a poison that left no trace but death. Duke Tavish was found in his chambers, slumped over his desk, a letter half-written before him. There was no sign of a struggle, no sound had been heard. It was a clean, professional killing. The lion's den, once a bastion of strength, was plunged into mourning and chaos. The old lion was dead, and suspicion, sharp and venomous, immediately fell upon the one person who stood to gain the most from his death: his son. Rumors spread like wildfire, fanned by unseen hands. Lord Ilarian's agents were quick to exploit the tragedy, painting Gamun as a patricide, a ruthless son who had murdered his own father to seize power and launch a reckless war. Even some of Gamun's own people looked at him with doubt in their eyes. The grief that tore at Gamun's heart was mingled with a burning rage. He knew this was Ilarian's work, a cruel and calculated move to destabilize the Lion Duchy and discredit him before his rebellion could even begin. He had lost his father and his reputation in a single night. Standing before his household, his father's body lying in state, Gamun made a vow. He would not let his father's death be in vain. He would not let the lies of his enemy prevail. He took his father's ducal signet ring from his finger and placed it on his own. "Lord Ilarian murdered my father and now seeks to blame me," he declared, his voice ringing with conviction. He thinks this will break us. He is wrong. This will forge us into a weapon. We will not mourn in silence. We will answer this outrage with fire and steel, for my father, for the Lion Duchy, for the Pearl Isles. With the mantle of leadership thrust upon him, I turned to the only men I could truly trust, my Lion Guard. They were more than soldiers. They were my brothers in arms, each a legend in his own right. First among them was Ser Nandros, a giant of a man known as the Lion's Shield. Nandros was a wall of muscle and steel, his loyalty to me as unshakable as the mountains of his homeland. He had sworn an oath to protect the ducal line, and he viewed Tavish's murder not just as a crime but as a personal failure. His grief, well, it manifested as a quiet, simmering fury, his hand rarely leaving the hilt of his massive greatsword. In the shadows moved Sir Malak, the silent arrow. An archer of unparalleled skill, Malak was a man of few words, his face a mask of stoic calm. He had been orphaned as a boy and raised by my family, his loyalty born of gratitude and a deep unspoken affection. The chaos of the Isles pained him, for he craved order and stillness. Every arrow he loosed was a step towards restoring the peace he so desperately desired. Malak's struggle was internal. He hated killing, yet his talent for it was the greatest weapon he could offer the friend who had become his lord. He was the quiet death that awaited my enemies. The soul of our small council was Brother Theodric, a warrior priest of the old faith. Theodric was as skilled with a mace as he was with scripture, his faith a fire that burned away doubt and fear. He believed our cause was righteous, a holy war to reclaim our land from a godless usurper. Yet he was troubled by our alliance with the merchant lords. He saw the rot of greed in their gilded promises and feared it would corrupt our noble cause. He constantly warned me to be wary, to remember that the path to hell is often paved with good intentions and borrowed gold. His faith was his guide, but his wisdom was his true strength. Together, these three men were the claws of the lion, each bringing a unique strength to my side. Nandros was my unyielding shield, Malak my unseen vengeance, and Theodric my moral compass. In the dark days following my father's assassination, I relied on them completely. We planned our strategies around the fire in my solar, our voices low and determined. We were a small band against a great power, but our bond was forged in loyalty and shared purpose. We were ready to fight, to bleed, and to die for our duke and for the future of the Pearl Isles. The first target was Vjorn Keep, a strategic fortress on the coast that Lord Ilarion had garrisoned with some of his most seasoned troops. A direct assault would be suicide. The keep was formidable, its walls thick and its defenders numerous. I knew we had to be clever, to use our limited numbers as a strength, not a weakness. The plan was daring, relying on surprise and the unique skills of my Lion Guard. It was a gamble, but inaction was the only certain path to defeat. We would strike at the heart of Ilarion's coastal control and show the Isles that the lion had teeth. The attack began under the cover of a moonless night. While the bulk of my small force created a diversion, feigning a clumsy frontal assault on the main gate, the real strike team approached from the sea. Sir Malak, his movements as silent as the fog rolling in from the water, used a grappling hook to scale the sheer sea cliff upon which the keep was built. He moved like a phantom along the ramparts, his arrows finding the throats of the sentries with chilling precision. One by one, the lookouts fell without raising an alarm, their bodies slumping into the shadows of the battlements. With the ramparts cleared, Malak lowered ropes for the rest of the elite team. I, Ser Nandros, and a handful of our best soldiers ascended the cliff face. Once inside, Nandros became a whirlwind of destruction. The giant knight, wielding his greatsword, smashed through the wooden door leading from the wallwalk into the barracks. He was a force of nature, his armor deflecting the panicked blows of the half-asleep soldiers as he carved a path of devastation. His roar was a challenge, drawing the attention of the garrison and pulling them away from the keep's vital mechanisms. While Nandros wreaked havoc, I fought my way with my men to the winch room that controlled the main portcullis. The fighting was desperate and close quarters, the clang of steel echoing in the narrow stone corridors. I fought with the fury of a man avenging his father, my blade a blur of silver. We overwhelmed the guards, and with a great heave we turned the massive winch, raising the heavy iron gate. The diversionary force outside, seeing the signal, surged forward into the now open fortress. The trap was sprung. Vjorn Keep fell before the sun rose, a stunning victory that sent a shockwave through the Isles. The fall of Vjorn Keep was the spark that ignited the rebellion. Inspired by my victory, other lords who had hesitated now raised their banners and joined the cause. The war for the Pearl Isles had truly begun. After a series of hard-fought battles, pushing Ilarian's forces back step by step, the conflict reached its climax at the Sun Citadel itself. My army, swelled by new allies, laid siege to the ancient seat of power. The final confrontation was at hand. To avoid a bloody and protracted assault that would destroy the historic citadel, I sent a challenge to Lord Ilarian, a duel to decide the fate of the kingdom. Lord Ilarian, a warrior to his core, accepted. He was a man who respected strength above all else, and he could not refuse such a direct challenge to his honor without appearing weak. The two of us met in the great courtyard of the Sun Citadel, our armies watching from the walls and the fields beyond. Ilarian was a formidable figure, tall and broad, clad in black, wolf-crested plate armor. He wielded a heavy, jagged axe. I stood opposite him, wearing the lion-crested armor of my house, my father's sword in my hand. The fate of the Isles would be decided by this single combat. The duel was a brutal ballet of violence. Ilarian's axe swings were powerful, each blow capable of shattering stone, but I was quicker, my movements fluid and precise. I parried the heavy strikes, turning Ilarian's strength against him, looking for an opening. The clang of our weapons was the only sound in the silent courtyard. We were evenly matched, the brute force of the northern wolf against the agile grace of the island lion. For long minutes we fought, sweat and blood mingling on the dusty ground, each of us pushing ourselves to the absolute limit of endurance. Finally, I saw my chance. Feinting a low strike, I drew Ilarian's axe downwards, and as he overextended, I spun inside his guard, my sword finding a gap in the armor at the shoulder. Ilarian roared in pain and staggered back. I pressed my advantage, disarming him with a deft twist of my blade. The Northern Lord fell to one knee, defeated and bleeding at my mercy. The Lion Guard roared in triumph. I raised my sword for the killing blow, but I hesitated. I looked at the defeated man and saw not a monster, but just a man. In a moment of clarity, I chose mercy. I would not become the butcher Ilarian was. I lowered my sword. As I offered my hand to the defeated Ilarian, a movement caught my eye. Prince Vjorn, Ilarian's young son, had been watching from the steps of the citadel. The boy's face was a mask of cold fury, his eyes filled with a hatred that was terrifying in its intensity. He saw not mercy, but an unforgivable humiliation of his father. While my attention was on the defeated lord, Vjorn drew a concealed dagger. He was not a warrior like his father. He was a serpent, and his venom was deceit. He did not move towards me, the obvious target. Instead, with a chilling cry of, "For my father!" Vjorn lunged, but his target was not me. He plunged the dagger into his own father's back. Lord Ilarian gasped, his eyes wide with shock and betrayal as he looked at his son. He slumped to the ground, dead. The courtyard erupted in chaos. Before anyone could react, Vjorn spun around, pointing a trembling, blood-soaked finger at me. "He killed him!" the prince screamed, his voice filled with feigned grief and outrage. "You all saw it!" He pretended to show mercy. Then he struck my father down. "He is a murderer!" The accusation hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Ilarian soldiers, who had just witnessed their lord's honorable defeat, were now inflamed with a renewed sense of purpose. They saw their prince's grief, heard his words, and believed the lie. To them, I was not a merciful victor, but a treacherous killer, a man who had stabbed their lord after he had yielded. The moment of potential peace was shattered, replaced by the certainty of more bloodshed. The duel that was meant to end the war had only deepened the hatred. I stood frozen, the bloody dagger at my feet, the dead lord before me, and the accusing prince screaming for my head. I was trapped in a nightmare. I had won the duel, I had shown mercy, and yet I was being framed as a villain. Ser Nandros and the Lion Guard quickly formed a protective circle around me, their shields locked, as Ilarian's enraged soldiers began to surge forward. The victory I had just secured had turned to ash in my mouth. I had defeated the wolf, only to be bitten by the serpent. The fight for the Sun Citadel was not over. It had just become far more personal and far more bitter. The battle that followed was brutal and desperate, but my forces, fired by the injustice of the accusation, ultimately prevailed. Prince Vjorn was captured, his lies exposed to all who had witnessed his treachery up close. The Sun Citadel was finally secured. I had won. I stood in the great hall of the Elephant Kings, the victor, the liberator of the Pearl Isles. But the victory felt hollow, the taste of it soured by the betrayals and bloodshed that had led me here. The throne was mine for the taking, yet it looked less like a seat of honor and more like a bed of nails. My troubles were far from over. The merchant lords, led by Master Vorlag, arrived to collect their due. They were no longer supplicants offering aid, they were creditors demanding payment. They presented contracts and agreements, their demands far exceeding the gold they had lent. They wanted control of the ports, exclusive rights to the Isle's timber and pearls, and the power to set taxes. They sought to bleed the kingdom dry, to turn my victory into their financial gain. I had cast out one foreign power only to find another, more insidious one, tightening its grip around my neck. As I wrestled with the merchant's demands, Brother Theodric approached me, his face grim. "Be warned, my lord," the warrior priest said, his voice a low rumble. "You have won the battle, but the war for the soul of the Isles has just begun. These men of coin will not rest until they own us all. They are a plague of a different kind, and do not forget the other lords. You have united them against a common enemy, but now that enemy is gone. Old rivalries will resurface. They will see a young duke on an ancient throne and wonder why it should be you and not them." I looked out from the citadel's high window, over the lands I had fought so hard to free. I had avenged my father, defeated my enemies, and claimed the ultimate prize. Yet I felt more trapped than ever. I was king now, but my crown felt heavy, a circlet of thorns. I was caught between the greed of the merchant lords and the simmering ambition of my own allies. The future of the Pearl Isles was as uncertain as ever, resting on my weary shoulders. True freedom, I was beginning to realize, was not something won in a single duel. It was a constant, unending struggle. The game was not over. A new, more dangerous one had just begun.